And we're welcoming 3 people who've been following COP, 2 people who've been there, Erik Huss and Elena Palenova, and Joachim, who has been following online diligently and making notes. And so what we'll be doing is the 3 of you will do your presentations, and that's going to take, I'm told, about half an hour. And then we'll do questions at the end of that. So I will be switching my camera off now. And I'm pretty sure the first one to take the floor is Joachim, and you will introduce yourself, please. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Joachim Persson. I've been following COP29 and COP30 online mostly. I'm a friend of Researcher's Desk, for those who wonder. I'm retired nowadays, so I have a little bit of time, although it never seems to be enough. Monica, will you put on the presentation, please? This COP30 started off bravely, basically being the COP of truth and the COP of implementation, and there was a lot of promise about indigenous people and having their voice heard. Unfortunately, it really didn't get so far, but it was a good start. Do I have the next slide? So it started with the urgency. In the first days, it was the theme of the COP, the urgency that we need to work with the climate change now. The message basically saying that the Paris Agreement works because we haven't overshot so badly that they predicted 10 years ago. But now we need to step up. We are off track. We are going to overshoot the 1.5 degrees Celsius goal. And as we do that, the focus must also be on just limit the extent of the overshoot and the duration. But everybody agreed about it. There was no one who ever put anything against it. We need to go faster. We need to break the curve. It's time for implementation. These were repeated time and time again during the presentations. And we need to transition away from fossil fuel fast, which especially from small island nations and people who are actually going to go extinct and basically taken away from the Earth's surface if we have an ocean level going up. And of course we need just transition, that it's fair for everyone that needs to do it. And for that you need just financing for transition, for adaptation, for loss of damage, for resilience, for gender equality and everything else. And everyone basically in the first days agreed that this needs to be solved, and COP is the way to solve it. Can I have the next slide, please? Okay, the total agreement that we were seriously off track to reach the Paris 1.5 goal. The best we could do with the current numbers was 1.8 or 1.6, depending on who you ask. And, well, nobody said anything against that. It's also important to say that the most prominent features of country group is G77 in China in this COP. They had the largest voice, and China has actually put down through their compatriots in the G77 quite a footprint. There's also been some discussion about China that they could do more. They are doing great in some areas, but their NDC 3 is basically just putting up everything that they promised them in NDC 2, and they know they could do more. There was a desperation from Africa and the island states, those who are hit the hardest by the climate change. And basically some of them are telling that if we don't manage to reach the Paris goal, they won't exist anymore. Indigenous people came into focus, which is great. Mountains were put on the agenda for the first time and actually had a say. The term Mutirao, the coalition, the work, was everywhere. And I would suggest that you look up what Mutirao really means, because it has a few meanings and it's quite a good thing and a great takeaway from COP30. Very interesting was that compared with the COP29, there was a lot less talk about nuclear, hydrogen, liquid natural gas, and carbon capture as solutions compared to COP29. Almost very few countries mentioned that as a solution. They said that they had that as an extra thing trying to reach the goals, but it wasn't the final solution. And there was less denial and cringe in the discussions and the statements, although very often in the global north countries, Sweden among them, are really patting themselves on the back and saying that they are doing great and using the 22, 23 figures of how well we have managed everything and ignoring what is happening forwards on the total problem with the climate crisis. Can I have the next slide? Disappointment. As with always with the COP, at least from the COP29 as well, there is a disappointment when you're near the end. Behind closed doors, every mention of fossil fuel phase out was removed from the final texts. All of them, again. Was the same thing last year. That's a real disappointment, because this was a focus subject. Finance for Global South's transition, mitigation, adaptation, all climate work is not even close to what is really needed. They are talking about $300 billion. We have a need of at least $3 trillion. And nothing is happening. Some phases with adaptation, they actually put it up and tripled it, but it's tripling towards 2035, 2045, not now. And they don't have tripling from what? NDCs and the national determined contributions and roadmaps from developed countries were lacking and not there. And among those are Sweden, who hasn't done their NDC 3.0. And it's no excuse that the EU has delivered theirs, because this is country-based. There was a presence of the oil lobby that was felt all the way into the meetings and was a team in several of the press conferences. And as usual, Global North is ignoring their historical responsibilities. They have released most carbon dioxide into the air ever, and doesn't really do great to point out that the others shouldn't do it when they have a heavy burden. Can I have the next slide? But, and this is important, at the end of the COP, 80 countries, more than 80 countries, are backing a roadmap to phase out the fossil fuels. And that is within the BAM and Mutirao, and including several oil-producing countries, which is very great. And it, as this was mentioned by the COP president, Andre Correa de Lago, in the closing plenary, it actually hit home very well. There was a tripling of adaptation finance, as I said, but we don't know exactly from what figure. The Bellum package was adopted, which is people-centered. It has something of the just transfers and inclusion. There was a global implementation accelerator launched, and I must say that US was missing, and of course everybody told about that was a problem. But California actually made up for it and stood up for the US climate and environment knowledge, which was extremely well. I'll put more of that in the blog later. Please go ahead. Buzzwords. Important things that actually put up, that is Tropical Forest Forever facility. That was together with the Leave It in the Ground. this is an important step because it's actually protecting the tropical forests and the indigenous people living in there, including those who are in voluntary isolation. And base for this is that oil, coal, and minerals beneath the tropical forest should be left there. And Brazil is very hard on this, saying that we are following this, but in the same time they are giving allowance to drill for oil outside the tropical forest in the sea, because that's not under the tropical forest. So it's world bending as usual. The mutirao, you need to learn that word because that would pop up a few times more. Among other things within this is the roadmap to phase out fossil fuels, and they will meet in Colombia in 2026, and there are several European countries supporting them. And I actually think there is a spirit within the mutirao that can deliver something and can make people join forces for the next COP in Turkey. And then there is BAM, but that it was a great buzzword. That's the action mechanism for a just transition. And I think that was a really good thing as well. Everybody had a BAM slogans, and I hope the others who are presenting will say something about it. And can I just have the last slide? I'll do it quickly. I think what I'm really missing is that developed countries think about what the climate change actually does. We are not doing saving the climate and trying to save Earth for Earth's sake and for nature's sake and for everything else, not at least alone. But basically, if we don't do this, our society, our economy, and the human as a living race will cease to exist, basically. Perhaps there will be rest, but our society as we know it today will not be there. We won't survive it. The planet will survive. There will be a mass extinction, but we won't. That's for me. Thank you. I hope that wasn't too depressing to end that way. I think it's Elena.
Thank you so much, Joachim. It was a really really good digest of what has happened on COP. Let me introduce myself, I guess. My name is Elena Palenova. I'm a PhD candidate at the Södertörn University, Stockholm, Sweden. And it was a dream of mine to go to COP, to see it with my own eyes. This dream came from my previous background. I used to work as a journalist back in Russia, as an environmental and climate journalist. And COP is this annual event that all journalists who are working with environmental topics, they cover it year after year. And for me, it was something unreachable that I always wanted to visit. And finally, it happened because of the researcher's desk. It turned out that this kind of event is kind of even easier to cover when you sit by your computer and you participate online, as Joachim did, because when you're there in real life, it's really incredible house with a lot of meeting room, with a lot of people and events going on, and it's very easy to get confused in this chaos. But yeah, for me, I maybe want to talk a little bit more about some kind of personal experience, because official agenda, it's easier again to get from media and from some kind of digest. I personally found it sometimes even easier, even being on site in COP, I found it easier to find some information about what is going on the place by reading after the meetings afterwards, even being there. So yeah, my experience there was as a person who is early career researcher trying to get as an observer to the conference. And for the researchers, you cannot get a badge, but you can get a badge as an observer from some kind of NGO. And since I also didn't manage to find any kind of funding for flights, tickets, and accommodation, so I get an option to stay with indigenous people in the indigenous camping in the tent. But everything went wrong, of course, as it could be. My colleague and PhD colleague, Bartira, who was there with me, she's Brazilian and she's studying indigenous people and their relation to climate change. And she had some connections with indigenous camping where we wanted to stay. And she didn't manage to get the badge to go to this blue zone. I will talk about this later. But my tent got lost on the way because the bag was lost in an airplane. Air company lost my bag with the tent, so I basically got left out without even a home where I wanted to stay, without even my tent. So idea was indigenous camping kind of disappeared, and I needed to find accommodation last moment. This is how I ended up with a person whom my colleague found. It's indigenous person and artist who is working also a lot, who worked a lot in the specially designated areas for indigenous artists and was selling his art. So it was kind of favelas where I was staying. And considering this whole situation with accommodation on COP, it was a big problem for many delegates to find a place to stay. As far as I know, only people who are negotiators, parts of parties, part of negotiators from the countries, they had no problems with finding a place to stay. But a lot of people whom I had some connection with, such as journalists from my previous career, people who are activists, people who are artists, people who came as an observer from NGOs, they really struggle to find a place where they can stay because there is no infrastructure for available accommodation on this COP. Yeah, people were staying in camping, people were staying in some schools or some kind of facilities where they had to sleep on bunk beds or mattresses for 50, 70 people in the same room. So yeah, when it comes to this, you could experience a lot of struggles with finding a place to live, a place to stay. So yeah, my observation, I followed personally, maybe I should mention again, my research is about wildfires. So I was very interested about how it's regulated in this kind of, in COP. So I was very, very pleased to find out that there was a big, interesting document signed called Call to Action on Integrated Fire Management and Wildfire Resilience, which was signed by 50 countries. And it's really nice that a lot of countries signed up this call to action, which basically says that there is a necessity of a paradigm shift in wildfires. So basically promote a transition from reactive fire suppression to more prevention-driven and management strategies that consider not only suppression, but also prevention and restoration after wildfires. So it's a kind of integrated holistic fire management. But maybe it's not very interesting because it's quite niche and it's something that is related to my research. So I followed many sessions that are related to wildfires or forests. And yeah, Joachim already mentioned about the Tropical Forest Forever facility. It's a really interesting kind of fundraising financial model where there's a kind of money are raised, public money, private money, that are kind of allocates resources to countries with tropical forest to preserve this area. And yeah, it's interesting that the interesting countries that are contributed, send money for this facility is Brazil and Indonesia, and also like France and Norway. I found it really fascinating that exactly these countries are contributed to this facility. So yeah, going back to the more broad experience, for me it was really fascinating to see this designation of blue zone and green zone. So for those who maybe not know it, it's the COP is separated into two big parts, and one of them is like this place where everything quote important happening, which is blue zone, where all negotiations are happening, and the green zone is a place for everyone. So all researchers, all artists, all people who are just general public can go there and see what's going on, have fun, have their stands, have they some interesting information, and some events are also going on in this green zone. And this is blue zone where people are who didn't manage to get the badge. They are very curious what exactly is going on. It's kind of this elitist place where all negotiations are happening and people are getting there to get important networking. So yeah, and was interesting how many activists who didn't manage to get into this blue zone, they targeted this blue zone as a place to tunnel kind of their actions. For example, this was a big news that went into the big event that went into the news is how like indigenous people protesting, trying to break into this blue zone, which is this, and they broke the door and the door was closed. And there were several other actions. There were protests basically every day of people trying to get into blue zone. And they were basically saying that, yes, our voices should be heard. We are important. And yeah, there was like activists who made a huge snake that tried to use the like head of the snake to get into this blue zone. But yeah, for me, what's interesting that yes, it was indigenous people and their voices were in the agenda, but eventually the places where indigenous people were had the access, it was specially designated area, not even green zone, but some places really far away from COP, some kind of like university camping, university campuses, or some kind of different type of places for events, where they was able to just like stay there with their stands and sell their art. And this is it. And there were some scandals regarding different tribe leaders and spokespersons who were not accepted to this elitist blue zone. Yes, that was kind of interesting. And yeah, everyday protests happening on the COP. Some protesters were in the blue zone. I think the most important not protesters, but activists is activists from the Climate Action Network. And they announce every day they give an award, anti-award, called Fossil of the Day. And countries who are getting Fossil of the Day, there are countries who are kind of getting being the worst when it comes to tackling climate actions. And I think initially, at the end, the fossil of the COP was European Union and I think Saudi Arabia. Yeah, I need to recheck this. Yeah, and there was like also protests from People Not Profit, and there were like some art events, which are artist activists. Yes, so yeah, I was very surprised by elitism. I was very surprised by kind of inequality, not even in the place where the whole event was happening, but even in between inside of the COP and COP delegates. And I was very surprised how, for example, my colleague whose field is Brazil, and whose field is climate and indigenous people. She did manage to get a badge, but it was very easy for people, for example, to just find a person to extend the badge if they know the right people. I shouldn't be maybe surprised because I shouldn't be very naive because this is how it's usually going on. But I still was surprised because yeah, seeing it with your own eyes, it's a bit different from assuming that this is how it's going on. And maybe at the end, I wanted to just give you some fun information about one of my Södertörn colleagues is studying dating in Grindr. So he's a proud gay man, and it was interesting to see. I have some friends from delegates who are using dating apps during COP, and it was interesting how the place on COP became a place for dating, and how people changed their names into Blue Zone, stuff like that, Blue Zone Brazil, and this is how they met each other during COP. So yeah, I hope I entertained you a little bit with my stories. Again, I was more following not the general overall agenda as Joachim did, but I was following more quite niche fire-related session, forest-related sessions. Yeah, I don't think I have anything more to add.
Thank you so much, Elena, for this very making it personal and come alive. And it's time to welcome Erik Huss, if he can turn his camera on. That's brilliant. Thank you.
Yes. Hello, everyone. Nice to see you. There's a lot of famous or known faces and names. That's nice to see. I'll give you some impressions from my COP. I was there as Elena as well. I just get my window there to share it. There we go. So I'm a geographer, glaciologist, earth system scientist, also journalist, and have been part of researchers desk since the start a couple of years ago. And I was representing researchers desk as I always, also my own company, Sustainability. But when you come to COP in the middle of the Amazon rainforest, you have this, before you enter the airport, they created a rainforest. So you really felt that this was not an ordinary COP with just boring conferences. And also there was a creature between a dragon and a jaguar from the rainforest to protect the COP. That was pretty cool. And also, the last thing you saw before you entered the welcome zone in the airport was about a message for the fossil fuel executives. You choose what your children will breathe. Protect Amazon now. I was pretty bold. And that's also one thing that differed this COP. There wasn't so many fossil fuel companies seen, and I only saw one oil shake. But this short roadmap for my presentation is first about Amazon rainforest. What is it? My first degree paper in geography was about Amazon rainforest. That was in 1989. So I've been longing to go to Amazon since 1989, or even since I was a kid, because I had all these animal books. Then some science and collaborations, bad cop versus good cop, and then feelings and impressions. So bear with me. Amazon rainforest, it's a pretty big area. That's Sweden. Sweden is one of the largest countries in Europe. You see, it's nothing compared to Amazon. Actually, Sweden, Amazon rainforest, just a forest, is 16 times bigger than Sweden. So if you're lost, then you're lost. And 95% of all medical substances that we use for medicine to cure comes from the rainforest. So if we cut it down, God knows what kind of substances we would have needed, and they're gone. And it's so big, this Amazon rainforest, it induces its own weather so far, if we don't cut it too much. And includes 9 countries, but also more than 3,300 indigenous territories. So it's a lot of indigenous people living in the forest. And they live like they've done for thousands of years. And this rainforest was created during the Eocene, that's 55 million years ago. So it's a pretty old biome. And it's more species than any other biome on this planet. One tree can host 2,500 species. So if you cut down a tree, you also kill 2,500 other species. You have to understand that. And it also impacts weather all around the Earth. It's called teleconnection. So even the monsoon activity in Southeastern Asia is affected by this Amazon rainforest. Now you see this is a fern, ormbunke in Swedish, and normally they're about 30 centimeters high. It might be that big, but in the rainforest, everything is big. This is me. I'm almost 190. And this was more than 2 meters high. So everything is big in the rainforest. And also this beautiful green, yellow, and blue ara. They're about 1 meter long, so it's a big bird. I also had to encounter one of them, and he was afraid of men, but he wasn't afraid of me. I'm probably more like an animal than a human, I guess. And this, when I was 5 years old, I had a python in my hands. And this is a boa constrictor. It's a female. And they have a project in the botanical garden. They're trying to save the boas. And I had the opportunity to say hello to her. She was really nice. She didn't speak so much, but she was hugging a lot. Okay, chapter 2, science and collaborations. I was lucky to be invited as a keynote speaker at the COP. I had around 50,000 viewers and listeners. I was talking about the importance of glaciers connected to human welfare. And one example of this is that you see the Andes is the longest, it's 6,000 kilometer long mountain range. It has a lot of glaciers and snow, and all these glaciers and snow, they pour down in the Amazon and feed the Amazon rainforest and then can create the rain. So without the glaciers, the rainforest will have trouble. So all is interconnected, even glaciers affect the rainforest. So the We Don't Have Time invited me to have the world's largest media platform for climate action. And also the ICCI, the International Climate and Cryosphere Initiative. As a glaciologist, I'm part of that. They preserve the Earth's cryosphere, everything frozen. And one keynote from Stefan Ramstorp from Potsdam Institute, where Johan Rockström is, was about the AMOC, the northern currency in Atlantic. And it's about to collapse, my dear friends. And if it collapses, the temperature in northern Scandinavia might drop 15 to 20 degrees. Meanwhile, we have a desertification in southern Europe. And that, if that happens, there will be very big trouble in having agriculture and producing food in Europe. And if that happens, we have a problem. Then there was the TBN Atlantic Rainforest. It's they preserve forests and plant many species of trees and plants. They plant 60 different species, so create a biodiverse plantation. And I was living with Ingrid Westman, who's part of this, and I was helping her a bit there. And also Biomes. It's a scientific organization behind the botanical garden in Belém. That's 15 hectares in the middle of Belém. They preserved this rainforest. They can serve and restore lands, forests, plants, and waters essential to life. And also, I'm starting to collaborate with them, and maybe we can start a Swedish hub connected to Bergianska trädgården and other gardens to protect animals and plants. So now number 3, bad cop, good cop. The bad cop was, for the first time ever, no Swedish ministers were present. The Swedish Prime Minister, he went to a right-wing meeting in the Baltic countries instead of going to this Jubilee COP. Only one European Parliament was there, but she didn't talk too much. China, India, Nigeria, USA, of course, and 22 oil states in the Middle East, they refused to accept that fossil fuels were mentioned in the final declaration. And that is a complete disaster, because that's the reason of the climate crisis. Like Joachim said also. But there was a good cop. A good cop was that no Swedish ministers were present, because they have so low ambition now, the Swedish government. So it's probably better that they were not there. The Swedish pavilion, they didn't have anything serious. They had mostly these karaoke nights, and they had some guy from the forest industry saying that clear cutting was good for the forest and so on. So the Swedish presence was not really impressive there. But the Brazilian presidency, he was magnificent. He was a hero. He just ignored that fossil fuel wasn't mentioned. He collected 85 different countries all around the world to create this Belém transition compass to phase out fossil fuels. And he said this in his final speech: we need to phase out fossil fuels. We will meet in Colombia in April, and the Netherlands will co-share this meeting. So there is, sometimes you don't have to be agree on everything. You can create something by yourself, and this was done by Brazil. And also there's a global implementation accelerator that, like Joachim said, we have to increase the speed of transformation or transition. And also tropical forest facility, Forest Forever facility, as Elena told, we will start protecting rainforest, and this will be done before 2030. And triple support to vulnerable countries that are hit the most by climate catastrophes. And there were hardly no oil sheikhs. The pavilions of United Arab Emirates, Dubai, Azerbaijan, and so on, Saudi, there were no people there. But there were lots of Amazon indigenous tribes. That was great. This is a pretty cool image by BBC. That's the chair, André Correa do Lago. He's a hero in my... That's why I said this COP will go to history. And UNFCCC head Simon Steele is there. And all these people are for UNFCCC discussing how shall we solve this? We need to include fossil fuels. And then they came up with this bold statement. Feelings and impressions. Well, there are 50,000 people here from all around the world, and I just have to show you some images. Norwegian pavilion were supported by 3 different oil companies. Nobody was there. That was great to see. And of course, the big entrance, Johan Falk from Exponential Roadmap, Daniel Craig and me. No, it's actually a German researcher, but he looked like Daniel Craig. And the best suits or clothes were by African delegates. So beautiful. And there was a great exhibition of photos from 50 years of photography from the Amazon rainforest in the Museum of Amazonia. This is just one of them. And Brazilian people, they can be a bit disorganized, but they are so friendly. I never met one rude Brazilian. They were so happy, so nice, helped. Nobody could speak English, but they had this Google Translate in the phone, and we were speaking to each other through the Google Translate. And also this is another Brazilian, nice clothes. He was just happy. And just outside the COP, there was rainforest, just other side of the street. And these are some mythical creature from the rainforest. He was walking around in the green zone. He was pretty cool. And along to my apartment, there was these mango trees along the boulevards, and you can hear all around you is a bump, bump, bump. And there was mangoes falling down from the trees. You can catch them and bring them up. And I've never eaten so much mango and fruit during 1 week. And also I lost my cup that I had for 10 years. And I just met one lady. I just asked randomly where I've been sitting, and she had seen it. And we went to another pavilion and we found it. 1 out of 50,000 delegates had seen my cup and we found it. Impressive. And this is just where you exit the whole COP. And when I came on the way back to Lisbon, I was walking all the way from Cascais through Estoril and down to Lisbon just to reflect on all this. And I needed this just to have the Atlantic Ocean behind me. So thank you for listening, and hope this could give you some impression of what a COP actually is. Yep, there we go. Thank you.